Now before we get into the video, I do want to say a massive thank you to today's video sponsors, and once again that is jerseyfifa.com. They really do help keep the content on this channel going, and they even sent me a free shirt which you can see on screen here. And as you can see, I got the new Manchester United home kit, and genuinely the kit really is top quality. I highly recommend their product. So make sure to get in a link in the description down below, and now if you use code JerseyFifa at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. You get a great football shirt, and you help support the channel, which I really do appreciate massively. Hey guys, welcome back to the AJ Analysis channel, where today we are going to be talking about Southampton and their rather impressive win over Chelsea last night. And to start off with the two lineups, we did of course cover Southampton against United at the weekend, and Southampton were largely unchanged apart from Perro coming in at left back for Gineppo, and Diallo coming into the midfield, meaning that Ward-Prowse moved into this attacking midfielder position, which Aribo took up against United. As for Chelsea, their 11 was pretty straightforward, with Reece James missing through a knock. It meant Azpilicueta played at right back, Koulibaly returned after his suspension from his red card the other week, we then saw Jorginho and Loftus-Cheek at the base of the midfield, Mason Mount and Ziyech behind Sterling and Havertz, in this sort of 4-2-2 hybrid system that we've been talking about. And rather interestingly in this game, because both sides went through periods of dominance where they controlled possession, but when that was the case, both sides were actually pretty good defensively. For both teams, their best play when they moved the ball slightly quicker. That was when they were at their best, when they were able to get the ball and quickly move possession through the thirds, and that was when we saw the best football, and it actually led to a really good game. And we will start with Southampton because they of course won the match. So when they had the ball here with the two centre-backs, typically we might expect this to be a problem if Havertz and Sterling really pressed them high, because obviously that's their man for man, but Chelsea didn't really want to do that, and they were happy to just let the centre-backs have the ball. From here we then saw Diallo pushing slightly further forward, Ward-Prowse would almost drop into a midfield three, and then Lavia would be the pivot point for the possession to be built. And what this done with the front two not really pressing but still being slightly wide is it meant that the centre-backs all night long could just easily play passes into Lavia in the midfield, allowing him to then turn and play the ball forward. And actually just on Lavia, he was brilliant again, and Southampton have got themselves a real gem. You have to watch him as he develops this season, because already he looks like a very well established footballer. He's playing way ahead of his years and he's very intelligent. But in terms of this game, like I said, it was the movement of Diallo that then became important in terms of ball progression. So with Diallo initially starting in his double pivot position, we then saw him pushing slightly further forward. And typically you might expect that to be Jorginho's man now. However, Elyounoussi also came quite narrow and also quite deep as well actually into these areas. So Jorginho was at risk of getting overloaded, so we then saw Mason Mount coming in as well to help out. But as you can see, this then left a load of room out wide here for Walker-Peters to push into, and basically that was what we saw. So when Lavia got the ball here, these two players would both move central and slightly higher in this area here, drawing Mason Mount and Jorginho in, leaving all the room in the world for Walker-Peters to push into. So constantly, Southampton had this out ball, and it was even the case when the centre-backs had the ball. And actually, I feel like they could have made Chelsea pay more if they'd have hit this ball more, especially Salisu at left centre-back. There seemed to be a few occasions where I thought he was about to hit the switch out to Walker-Peters, but he just seemed a little bit hesitant. Maybe that was a lack of confidence, or maybe he just doesn't trust in his long passing ability. But either way, Lavia was still able to play the passes, Ward-Prowse was able to play the passes, and Walker-Peters was able to get forward. And then he had quite an interesting battle up against Cucurella, and these are two very good fullbacks in the league, but Walker-Peters had the beating of him all day long, making these runs, knocking the ball past Cucurella, and then basically just chasing the ball after it. And that was what he done for most of the night, and Mason Mount didn't really offer enough protection going backwards, so Walker-Peters was constantly able to get into these areas, in behind the Chelsea defence. And like I said, Cucurella had a really difficult night. I'm not saying he played badly, but it was a long old night for him, because Walker-Peters just kept going at him every time he got the ball. And this really was Southampton's main method of getting the ball forward down this right-hand side. However, whilst they may have built attacks down this right-hand side, the threat then actually largely came from the left, because once they'd pushed into these right areas, Chelsea would then of course have to shift across to adjust to that, across like this. And we actually often saw Ziyech almost tucking in at right wing back, becoming a bit of a back five shape, but like this we could see Chelsea retreating and squeezing over to one side of the pitch to try and deal with Walker-Peters. But what this meant was that when a team shifts across from one side to the other, it then leaves gaps everywhere, basically. So Walker-Peters was regularly able to cut the ball back into these areas, whether it was Elyounoussi or James Ward-Prowse, somewhere like this. We then saw Armstrong make a darting run in this area here, which would drag the defenders, and then Perro was able to come all the way forward from left back. And like I said, with Ziyech not being a natural right wing back, he didn't really clock onto this well enough. So this was the movement: progress the ball down the right hand side like this, and then look to play the ball inside and then go out the other way, where, like I said, these Armstrong runs from out to in drag Azpilicueta and Ziyech, which then left Pero with all the room in the world to get the ball out here, before then either looking to cross or perhaps attempt a cutback or a smart little pass into the box. And that's what we saw for one of Southampton's goals. So, of course, we're at the wrong point here. Their first goal came from a set piece from a corner, which weren't too well taken, and Lavia scored from the edge of the box. Really good goal. But this one was more of a tactical thing, so we can see them progressing the ball down the right hand side here. And if we just look at the Chelsea players that are over here, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of Chelsea players over one side of the pitch, whereas if we look over here, we've only got two. Azpilicueta, our right back, and Ziyech now tucking in at right wing back. And just keep your eye on Armstrong and Pero as the move develops. So anyway, they've got the ball here, and then what they would do is play the ball in here toward Prowse, who would then turn, and we can see this Armstrong run. So if you look where he was here, he's just here, and then he drives. He really drives into this gap. And Ziyech is going to follow him. Typically, a right wing back may not follow him there because they'd be more aware of this, and Azpilicueta's positioning would be better. But Armstrong makes this run into here. We can see Ziyech follows him, and now Pero is in a lot of room to receive the pass. The pass comes forward to him in this left wing back spot. He then has the time, and he picks out a really nice cutback into the box actually. I'm not too sure if it was intentional, but if it was really impressive. But just look how far away Ziyech is. Nowhere near him. Pero takes his time, gets the ball to Armstrong, who then finishes into the back of the net. With a really good goal actually, to be fair. And this was kind of the story for Southampton. When they got the ball, as they always do, they really looked to push the fullbacks nice and high up the pitch. But actually, if we now switch to Chelsea and talk about them, we can see that this is the issues that this is going to cause for Southampton. Because when you have your fullbacks both pushing extremely high, your midfielders getting involved in possession as well, there's room up here. And if Chelsea are able to get the counter-attack right, then they do have a 2 versus 2 situation. And this was kind of similar to what we saw from the Southampton versus United game at the weekend. However, anytime Chelsea were able to win the ball here and quickly look to break, Salisu and Bella-Kotchap in particular done an incredible job once again. Salisu I didn't think had his best game, but he still kept Sterling reasonably quiet. But Bella-Kotchap on Havertz was an absolute mismatch. Bella-Kotchap really bullied him physically, in the air, on the floor, with his pace, with his strong tackling. He really dominated this game. And as a result, it largely nullified Chelsea's threat on the counter-attack. But they did have other ways of getting forward. So in these situations where Chelsea were more set on the ball and looking to build possession, we saw them using a bit of a 2-4 shape, which is very natural when you use a 4-2-2 formation. And we can see that they outnumber the Southampton players here. However, Southampton were quite smart with their press. For example, the pass would go wide to the fullback, El-Yunusi would squeeze over, Walker-Peters would be high on the winger, Ward-Prowse would come across on Jorginho, and then the winger on the far side, this time Armstrong, would come over on Loftus-Cheek. And it just cut off all the passing lanes, and also Che Adams done a really good job on Koulibaly. And say if the ball went neat, they'd go backwards and then go the other way, we'd then see it switch. So Armstrong would come across, Adams would come across, Ward-Prowse would come across, and El-Yunusi would come across. And this made it really difficult for Chelsea to really build possession. However, Thomas Tuchel is a smart manager, and what we started to see was that when Silva got the ball in these situations here, Loftus-Cheek just started to drift a little bit further forward. So Jorginho is now playing more central, very much as the pivot, and Loftus-Cheek would just drift. He's not making a real driving run at the heart of the defence to get forward, he's just drifting slightly further forward, and what it does is it causes hesitation. And I was saying the other day, again talking about Southampton, when you hesitate in a slight man-to-man press, then that can be an issue for you. And we saw Loftus-Cheek just stepping into this area here. Armstrong would just hesitate and come in here, and then that allowed Silva to play the ball forward to Azpilicueta, and this was from where they could then progress the ball forward. And that's very much what we saw as the game developed. This was something that we saw down the left-hand side of the pitch as well, with Cucurella having plenty of time once El-Yunusi was dragged in to really step forward and carry the ball forward. And this is where players like Walker-Peters and Pero on the other side were slightly indecisive. So with Cucurella having beat El-Yunusi, because El-Yunusi was narrow, so Cucurella carried the ball forward, Walker-Peters was then given a decision of whether to come and really close down Cucurella or properly sit off. And in the first half we saw indecision where he was kind of getting caught in between like this. But what this done is it meant Cucurella still had time to play the ball, but if we now look at the space that Walker-Peters has left in behind, Chelsea now have a big area that they can exploit, and that's what we saw. So Mason Mount would then, despite starting wider, come into this pocket here, get the ball on the half turn, and then Kai Havertz would make a nice run out here, outside Bella-Kotchap. And this is actually where Havertz spent most of the game. He was in a front two with Sterling, but more often than not Sterling was almost alone up front, because Havertz was nearly always playing left wing with Mason Mount tucked in on this side here. And It's actually what we saw for one of the goals. But also, just quickly on the right hand side, we saw something reasonably similar, except it would occasionally be, like we said, Loftus-Cheek taking up that higher starting position. The ball would go to Azpilicueta out here. Ziyech would then come in the hole. Perro's caught out of position into Ziyech and then to Loftus-Cheek out wide. But more often than not, it was down the left-hand side that we saw Chelsea attacking. This was where most of their threat came from. And again, that's what we can see in the pictures. So this is for Chelsea's opening goal of the game, and it came just after an attack. And the first thing we can see is Cucurella making a run forward, mounting this area, but more importantly, Havertz out wide on the right-hand side. And what we're going to see is with Havertz making these sorts of runs, on the ball into these wide areas, the Southampton centre-backs are going to get dragged about, and then Mount is going to find themselves in pockets of space. And that's what we saw here. So Havertz gets the ball wide, and just watch the run of Mount here into this pocket. So he's driving, let me draw it for you. He's driving into this space here, and Southampton don't really track him properly. He gets into position, gets the ball. We then see Sterling here. Chelsea have outnumbered Southampton. The ball comes across to Sterling, and he puts it into the back of the net. And that was kind of the story for the first half. However, with Southampton scoring just before half-time, that goal we were looking at earlier, it did change how things played out in the second half. Quite early in the second half, we saw Chelsea make a change of formation, going to a 3, with then Kovacic playing as a solo pivot. This 4 in midfield here, look at that for a lovely straight line. And then the front 2 up top. And this did cause some different problems for Southampton, however they actually dealt with them really well. And the reason for that was because they were 2-1 up. So especially in the last 20 minutes, they were happy to sit behind the ball and absorb the pressure basically. So they've got plenty of players back. Ward-Prowse was dropping in like this, El Younisi was coming in, and Che Adams was left up front. Now, this obviously gave Chelsea more time on the ball, and with almost this diamond at the back here, we did see Cucurella and Koulibaly now able to step forward with possession. However, Southampton soon reacted and they changed to a back 3 or a back 5 themselves. We saw Gineppo come on for Perro at wing-back. We saw Lianco come on and play in the defence, now making this new back 5 shape. And who else did we see come off? We saw Armstrong come off for Aribo. And it allowed them to go into this sort of shape like... Give me 1 second. I've got too many players here. Like this. So this is eventually the shape that Southampton ended up with. And Adams and Aribo are now going to try and stop these centre-backs stepping like this. And then Ward-Prowse is going to follow Mason Mount literally everywhere he goes. And over on the other side, Diallo is going to do the same against Ziyech. Gineppo is going to push high on Pulisic to stop him getting any time on the ball. And Walker-Peters is going to do the same for Chilwell. And then at the back, they have the outnumbered. They've won the numerical duel here because they've got 3 centre-backs to the Chelsea front 2. And this was a really smart move from Hasenhüttl, because Chelsea had now had 4 players deep progressing the ball, but that didn't bother Southampton because they were happy for Chelsea to progress the ball, because they knew that if Chelsea were able to get into a good crossing position and the ball was coming to the box, Bella Kotchap was always going to beat Sterling in the air, and if it came from the other side, with Chilwell crossing the ball into the box, then even if Broja did win the first contact, Southampton had the second man to get behind the ball. And it was sort of a game of 2 halves. In the first half, Southampton really went toe for toe, and got them really where they wanted them, attacking down the right-hand side, switching it to the left. It really was brilliant. In the second half, with their lead, they naturally kind of sat deep as the energy levels dropped. They were happy to get behind the ball and let Chelsea try and break them down, and Chelsea basically didn't have the answers. And that is a concern I have with this Chelsea squad. As for Southampton, I thought they were absolutely brilliant. Sorry, I've just hit the mic. I thought Southampton were brilliant though. Their attitude towards the end of the game in particular, you could see some of those players were really, really tired. They were exhausted, but they were still sprinting after every ball. No Chelsea player got more than 3 touches on the ball without quickly being closed down. And it was really brilliant from Southampton, and Hasenhüttl should be proud of his squad and what they produced last night. I thought they were impressive against United and unlucky to come away without a single point. In this game in particular though, they really deserved to win, and they were actually very impressive. So well done to Southampton. As for Chelsea, there are some problems, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Were Chelsea bad, or were Southampton really good? Let me know what you think. Thank you guys for watching, congratulations to Southampton fans, and I'll see you in the next one.